Admiral James Walker stood on the bridge of the EDF Valiant, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the endless sea of stars. The ship hummed beneath his feet, a comforting sound he had known for 20 years. Earth's flagship was old by galactic standards, a relic, as their alien allies often said. But Walker knew better. "Status report," he said, his voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Anna Miller looked up from her console. "All systems normal. Admiral, the fleet is in formation and ready for jump. Alliance coordinates received." Walker nodded. Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance just 20 years ago, a blink of an eye compared to species who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Humans were the newcomers, the primitives. It didn't help that Earth had insisted on keeping their own ship designs, rather than adopting Alliance standards. "Put me through to the fleet," Walker said. Miller tapped a few buttons, and a small light turned green. "Channel opened, sir. This is Admiral Walker. In 10 minutes, we jump to the Vega system to assist the Alliance with what they're calling a minor border dispute with the Krull Dominion. Remember your training. Remember Earth. And remember, we show only what we need to show." Walker out. The last part was important. Earth Command had been clear. This mission was as much a test of Earth as it was about helping the Alliance. Show competence, but not everything. Not unless necessary. The Valiant's jump drive engaged with a deep hum that vibrated through the hull. The stars blurred, stretched, and then snapped back into place. The Vega system spread out before them, a bright yellow star surrounded by 8 planets and 2 asteroid belts. And ships, hundreds of them. The Alliance fleet was already assembled, sleek, glowing vessels that seemed to float effortlessly in space. No visible engines, no visible weapons, just smooth curves and pulsing lights. Next to them, Earth's 12 warships looked like ancient sailing vessels beside modern yachts. "Alliance command ship is hailing us," Miller said. On screen. The view screen flickered, and a blue-skinned alien appeared. Commander Xalis of the Trescent Fleet was tall and thin, with 4 arms and large pupilless eyes that seemed to look through Walker rather than at him. "Admiral Walker," Xalis said, his translator giving his voice an artificial smoothness. "Your fleet is late. The strategy meeting begins in 10 minutes. Try to keep up." The screen went dark before Walker could respond. Captain Tom Reed's face replaced Xalis on the screen. Reed commanded the EDF Intrepid, second only to the Valiant in size and firepower. "Friendly bunch, aren't they?" Reed said with a half-smile. "As expected," Walker replied. "Maintain formation and follow us in. And remember, show only what we need to show." Reed finished. "Got it, sir." The Earth fleet moved toward a massive space station at the edge of the system's inner planets. Its design was typical Alliance architecture, all curves and light, with no sharp edges or visible seams. The docking procedure was automated, with tractor beams gently guiding Earth's ships into their assigned bays. Walker, Reed, and Commander Maria Jackson from the EDF Defender made their way to the strategy room. The station's corridors were filled with representatives from a dozen different species, most of whom gave the humans curious or dismissive glances. The strategy room was a large circular chamber with a holographic display in the center. Alliance commanders already stood around it, talking among themselves. The hologram showed the Vega system and the expected approach vector of the Krull forces. Commander Xalis nodded curtly as the humans entered. Beside him stood Commander Zorl of the Vala fleet, a reptilian species known for their tactical brilliance. "Now that everyone is here," Xalis began, emphasizing everyone while looking at Walker, "we can discuss our strategy. The Krull have been making small incursions along this border for months. Intelligence suggests they will send a small fleet, perhaps 20 ships, to test our resolve." Zorl's forked tongue flicked out briefly. "We will position our main fleet here." He pointed to a spot near the system's 4th planet. and crush them with superior firepower. Walker studied the hologram. Something felt wrong. "What about the asteroid belt?" he asked. "It would make a perfect hiding spot for additional forces." The room went quiet, and then several alien commanders laughed. It was an unsettling sound, coming from so many different species. "This is why we put newcomers in the rear," Xalis said with obvious amusement. "The Crawl do not hide, Admiral. They are direct in their attacks, relying on their adaptive shielding. They have no need for your primitive tactics." Walker kept his face neutral. "Of course. Just asking." "Your Earth fleet will position here." Zoril pointed to a spot far from the expected battle zone. "Your vessels would not survive direct contact with Crawl weapons. Your role is to observe and learn how real space combat works." Reed shifted beside Walker, clearly annoyed, but a slight shake of Walker's head kept him quiet. "We have one question," Walker said carefully. "What makes you certain this will be a small incursion?" Xalis made a dismissive gesture with his lower right arm. "The Crawl are predictable. They test, they analyze, they withdraw. Only then do they commit significant forces." Commander Jackson spoke up. "And if they don't follow the pattern this time?" Another round of laughter, louder now. "Then we still crush them," Zoril said. "Our energy shields and particle weapons are generations beyond their technology, and millennia beyond yours." He looked pointedly at the projectile weapon holstered at Jackson's side. "You still used physical ammunition. It's charming." Walker felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same calm that had served him through dozens of battles in Earth's orbital conflicts before first contact. "We appreciate the instruction," he said with a slight bow. "Earth's fleet will follow your lead." As they left the strategy room, Reed moved close to Walker. "They have no idea what we can do," he whispered. "Let's hope it stays that way," Walker replied. The Earth fleet moved to its assigned position, appearing to comply fully with Alliance commands. From the Valiant's bridge, Walker watched as the glittering Alliance ships formed up in their battle formation. Beautiful, but predictable. Lieutenant Miller monitored the long-range scanners. "Sir," she said suddenly, "I'm picking up multiple jump signatures at the edge of the system." Walker moved to her station. "How many?" Miller's face paled slightly. "Not 20 ships, sir. I count at least 60. No, 70. Still increasing. Alert the Alliance command, and bring our fleet to full battle readiness." Quietly. On the main view screen, space seemed to ripple and tear as ship after ship appeared. Dark, angular vessels that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. The Crawl had arrived, and they had not followed the pattern. "Sir," Miller looked up at Walker, "the Alliance is hailing all ships." Commander Xalis sounds concerned. Walker allowed himself a small smile. "I bet he does. Put him through. This is not a raid." Xalis's voice had lost its mocking tone. "We are tracking over 100 Crawl warships. All vessels prepare for major engagement." "Acknowledged," Walker said. Then, after the channel closed, "And now we'll see who's charming." The Crawl fleet moved forward, their formation perfect and threatening. This was no border skirmish. This was an invasion. And Earth's Relic warships were about to show the galaxy what they could really do. Chaos erupted across Alliance channels as over 100 Crawl warships advanced through the Vega system. The sleek Alliance vessels rushed to form a defensive line, their engines leaving trails of blue light against the darkness of space. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," Lieutenant Miller said from her station on the Valiant's bridge. "Weapons hot but not targeted. Shields at maximum." Admiral Walker nodded, watching the main view screen with narrowed eyes. The Crawl ships were exactly as Earth's intelligence had described. Angular black vessels with sharp edges and pulsing red lines along their hulls. They looked like predators, designed to inspire fear. "Hold position," Walker ordered. "Let's see how our advanced friends handle this." The Alliance fleet moved with impressive coordination, their formation spreading out to create a wall of energy shields. Commander Xalus's voice came through on the command channel, no longer mocking but clipped and professional. All vessels, engage on my mark. Target the lead crawl cruisers with concentrated particle beams. Walker exchanged glances with his bridge crew. Earth's tactical simulations had predicted this exact response, a show of overwhelming firepower meant to force a retreat. The Tresson and Volif ships fired in unison. Brilliant beams of energy lashed out across space, striking the front line of crawl vessels. For a moment, it looked devastating. Then the crawl ships shimmered, their hulls absorbing and dispersing the energy attacks. "They're adapting," Miller said, eyes fixed on her scanner. "The crawl shields are reconfiguring to match Alliance weapon frequencies." Walker nodded. As expected. What happened next stunned everyone. The crawl returned fire, but not with energy weapons. Small, missile-like objects launched from their ships, thousands of them, spreading out in swarms. "What are those?" Captain Reed asked over the command channel. The answer came seconds later. The swarms slammed into the Alliance shields, but instead of exploding, they attached themselves to the energy barriers. Each point of contact flared bright, and then dimmed, as the devices drained power from the shields. "Shield leeches," Walker muttered. "Clever." 3 Tresson ships suddenly lost their shields completely. The crawl fired again, this time with conventional energy weapons. Without protection, the beautiful Alliance vessels were torn apart, their hulls never designed to withstand direct hits. "Alliance fleet is taking heavy damage," Miller reported. "Their formations are breaking." Walker watched as the carefully planned Alliance defense collapsed in minutes. The crawl had studied their enemies well. Each Alliance tactic was met with a precise countermeasure. It wasn't just a battle. It was a slaughter. "Admiral, we're receiving a direct communication from Commander Xalus," Miller said, surprise evident in her voice. The view screen showed Xalus's command center, filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. The commander's blue skin was now pale, almost white. "Earth fleet," he said, his translator struggling to maintain a steady tone. "We request immediate assistance. Our shields are ineffective against their current weapons." Walker kept his face neutral, though a part of him wanted to remind Xalus of his earlier mockery. "We're observing as instructed, Commander. What sort of assistance did you have in mind?" A nearby explosion rocked Xalus's ship, and the image shuddered. "Anything. Do what you can. We're being decimated." Walker turned to Miller after the transmission ended. "Tactical analysis." Miller's fingers flew over her console. The crawl are focused entirely on countering energy-based weapons and shields. Their vessels show minimal point defense systems for physical projectiles. They've never faced our type of weapons before. "They've adapted to fight ghosts," Walker said quietly, then raised his voice. "Battle stations. All ships, prepare for offensive maneuvers." He opened the fleet-wide channel. "Earth Fleet, this is Admiral Walker. Form up on the Valiant. Weapons free, but hold fire until my command." The 12 Earth ships moved with practiced precision, forming a tight, arrow-shaped formation with the Valiant at the point. To anyone watching, it might have looked like the humans were making a desperate, suicidal charge. Commander Jackson's voice came through from the Defender. "Sir, the Alliance ships are still in our line of fire." "They won't be for long," Walker replied grimly. "The crawl are pushing them back. We'll have clear shots in 30 seconds." The Earth ships accelerated together, their engines burning hot. Alliance vessels scrambled to get out of their way, probably assuming the humans were attempting to retreat from the battle. Walker waited, counting down in his head as they closed the distance to the crawl front line. The enemy ships didn't adjust their formation. They barely seemed to notice the approaching Earth vessels. "Targeting solutions locked," Miller announced. "All ships report ready." Walker took a deep breath. "All ships, fire." What happened next would be discussed in Alliance War colleges for generations. The Earth ships fired in perfect unison. Not beams of energy, but solid projectiles. Tungsten rods accelerated to near-relativistic speeds by massive electromagnetic rails that ran the length of each vessel. The weapons were simple in concept, ancient by galactic standards, and utterly devastating. The first volley tore through a Krull battlecruiser like it was made of paper. No energy shields, no matter how advanced, could stop physical objects moving at such speeds. The Krull vessel broke apart, atmosphere and bodies venting into space. For 3 seconds, there was silence on all channels. Then the Earth fleet fired again, and again. 6 Krull ships were destroyed in under a minute, their advanced defenses useless against weapons they had never encountered. The rest of their fleet began to turn, confusion evident in their suddenly erratic movements. "They're trying to adapt," Miller said, wonder in her voice. "But they can't. They have nothing in their systems to counter kinetic weapons of this scale." On the Alliance channels, stunned silence gave way to confused chatter. Commander Xalas's voice cut through it all. What are they firing?" Captain Reed's laugh could be heard across the command channel. "Just good old-fashioned metal, Commander. Moving really, really fast." The Krull fleet attempted to regroup, bringing their weapons to bear on the Earth ships. Energy beams lashed out, striking the Valiant and the other Earth vessels. But where Alliance ships had shattered under such attacks, Earth's warships held firm. Armor holding at 87%, Miller reported as the ship shuddered. Minimal penetration on decks 4 through 6. Repair teams responding. Walker nodded. "Return fire. Target their command vessels." Another volley launched from the Earth fleet, this time spread across multiple targets. The Krull began evasive maneuvers, but they were too slow, too unprepared for this type of combat. "Sir, we're being hailed by multiple Alliance ships," Miller said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "They're asking if we require assistance." Walker allowed himself a small grin. "Tell them we're managing for now, but we'd welcome their support when they're ready." He looked back at the view screen, where the Krull fleet was now clearly in disarray. Their formation had broken, their coordinated attack fallen apart in the face of Earth's primitive but devastating weapons. "Send to all Earth ships," Walker said. "Phase 2 begins now. Deploy drone swarms and prepare for close engagement." As the small, deadly drones launched from Earth's warships, Walker thought about all the mockery, all the dismissive comments about relics and outdated technology. Perhaps after today, the galaxy would learn an important lesson. Never underestimate humans and their capacity for warfare. The battle had only just begun. Space around the Valiant lit up with explosions as Earth's drone swarms engaged the Krull fleet. Unlike the sleek, single-purpose weapons of the Alliance, Earth's combat drones were small, ugly, and brutally effective. Each one carried a modest payload, just enough to damage a specific system on an enemy ship. Drones performing at 92% efficiency, Lieutenant Miller reported. "Krull point defenses are overwhelmed." Admiral Walker nodded, watching the tactical display. The Krull ships were trying to target the drones, but there were simply too many. It was like trying to stop a flood with your hands. "Sir," Miller continued, "Alliance vessels are regrouping. Commander Xalas is requesting coordination information." Walker allowed himself a small smile. Just hours ago, the Alliance commanders wouldn't have dreamed of asking Earth for tactical advice. How quickly things change when survival was at stake. "Send them our drone control frequencies. Tell them to stay behind our ships and target any Krull vessel that breaks formation." The battle had shifted from an orderly engagement to a chaotic melee. The Krull, their initial advantage lost, were struggling to adapt to Earth's unconventional warfare tactics. Their ships were designed to fight energy weapons with energy shields, not solid projectiles and swarms of explosive drones. Captain Reed's voice came through on the command channel. "Admiral, my forward section is heavily damaged. We've lost 2 railguns, but the rest of the ship is operational. On any Alliance vessel, such damage would have meant retreat or destruction. But Earth ships were different. They were built to take hits and keep fighting." "Maintain position, Tom," Walker ordered. Use what you have left. The EDF Intrepid continued firing, even with part of its bow torn open to space. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off the damaged sections, and the crew carried on as they had trained to do. This was what set human ships apart. They were designed with the expectation of damage. Commander Jackson's Defender moved to support the Intrepid, positioning itself to cover the damaged ship's blind spots. The two captains didn't need orders to coordinate. They followed battle tactics developed over centuries of Earth's naval warfare. On the main view screen, Walker could see that several Alliance ships had begun to mimic Earth's formation. The beautiful, fragile vessels were trying to position themselves behind the sturdier human ships, using them as shields while firing their energy weapons through gaps in the formation. "They're learning," Walker observed. Miller nodded. "Yes, sir." And the Crawl are losing their cohesion. The tide of battle had turned dramatically. The Crawl fleet, which had begun with such overwhelming force, was now scattered and defensive. Several of their ships were attempting to withdraw, but Earth's drones pursued them relentlessly. A massive explosion drew everyone's attention. One of the largest Crawl vessels had suffered a catastrophic reactor breach. The shockwave damaged nearby ships, creating even more confusion in the enemy ranks. "Status report," Walker demanded. Miller scanned her console. "Alliance fleet is down to 60% strength. Our fleet is at 85% combat effectiveness, though several ships have taken significant damage." Walker studied the tactical display. The Crawl still outnumbered them, but numbers meant little when your tactics failed. He opened a channel to the entire Earth fleet. "All ships, implement Formation Delta. Prepare for close quarters engagement." Earth's vessels began to move in what would have appeared to ancient eyes like a naval battle line. Ships positioned themselves side by side, creating overlapping fields of fire that no enemy could pass through without taking multiple hits. "The Crawl flagship is moving," Miller announced. "They're targeting the Intrepid specifically." Walker frowned. The enemy had identified Reed's damaged ship as a weak point. "Warn Captain Reed. All nearby ships provide covering fire." But it was too late. 3 Crawl cruisers converged on the Intrepid, their weapons concentrating on the already damaged sections of the ship. The Earth vessel shuddered under the assault, more of its hull peeling away into space. "Intrepid is reporting critical damage," Miller said, her voice tight. "Their main reactor is destabilizing." Reed's face appeared on the command screen. Blood ran down from a cut on his forehead, and smoke filled his bridge. "Can't hold her together much longer, James," he said, using Walker's first name for perhaps the first time in their long service together. "Abandon ship, Tom," Walker ordered. "Get your crew to the escape pods." Reed shook his head. "No time. And they'd just pick off the pods anyway." His expression hardened. "But I can make this count." Before Walker could respond, the Intrepid's engines flared to full power. The damaged ship turned and accelerated directly toward the largest Crawl cruiser. "Tom, don't," Walker began, but the channel had already closed. The bridge crew of the Valiant watched in stunned silence as the Intrepid slammed into the Crawl vessel at full speed. The resulting explosion engulfed both ships, and when the light faded, nothing remained but debris. "Captain Reed and the Intrepid are gone," Miller reported, her voice barely a whisper. "So is the Crawl cruiser." Walker stood rigid, his face a mask of control despite the loss of his friend. Note in the log: Captain Thomas Reed gave his life to save this fleet. His sacrifice will not be forgotten. He allowed himself one deep breath, then continued. "Now we finish this." All ships pressed the attack. No mercy. The Earth fleet surged forward with renewed determination. The Alliance vessels, witnessing Reed's sacrifice, followed close behind. For the first time, they fought as a single coordinated force. The Crawl flagship, a massive black vessel at the rear of their formation, began transmitting on all frequencies. The message displayed on the Valiant's screen in translated text. "Earth vessels. Identify your technology. What weapons are you using?" Walker's reply was brief. "Nothing new. Just iron, grit, and a few thousand years of practice. He closed the channel and turned to Miller. Target their flagship. All weapons. The Valiant's railguns charge, humming with power. The sound reminded Walker of ancient warships, of cannon fire and battleship guns, the old ways of war that humanity had never fully abandoned. As the Earth fleet closed in on the Krull flagship, Alliance vessels moved in perfect coordination with them for the first time. Commander Xalis' ship pulled alongside the Valiant, its energy weapons complementing Earth's kinetic arsenal. Perhaps Xalis' voice came through, more subdued than Walker had ever heard it. There is something to learn from your traditional methods, after all. Walker didn't respond. There would be time for talk later. Now was the time for action, for showing the galaxy that humanity's relics had teeth, and they knew how to use them. The combined fleet fired as one, and the Krull flagship disappeared in a blinding flash of light and heat. The battle wasn't over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not despite its warlike past, but because of it. The destruction of the Krull flagship sent shockwaves through what remained of their fleet. For the first time since the battle began, the enemy ships broke formation completely, some turning to flee while others fought with desperate fury. Admiral Walker watched from the Valiant's bridge as the combined Earth Alliance fleet pressed their advantage. His uniform was stained with sweat, and his eyes burned from the smoke that lingered in the air despite the environmental systems working overtime. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice rough from shouting commands over the past 3 hours. Lieutenant Miller looked up from her console. Decks 3 through 7 reporting hull breaches, all contained by emergency bulkheads. Railguns 2 and 5 are offline. Drone reserves at 43%. Casualty reports coming in from all ships. Her voice faltered slightly. But our combat effectiveness is still at 70%. Walker nodded grimly. They had lost good people today. The Intrepid was gone with all hands, and every other Earth ship had taken damage. But they were still fighting, still effective, while the Krull fleet was falling apart. "Sir," Miller continued, "Commander Xalis is requesting a direct channel." "Put him through." The Trescent commander appeared on screen. His blue skin was now ashen gray with fatigue, and one of his 4 arms was bandaged. "Admiral Walker," Xalis said, his tone respectful for the first time. "My tactical officers have analyzed your combat data. We believe the remaining Krull forces are attempting to regroup near the outer planet. If they succeed, they could mount another attack." "Agreed," Walker replied. "What do you propose?" The question seemed to surprise Xalis. Just hours ago, he wouldn't have bothered asking the primitive human for tactical input. Now, he was seeking it. "My remaining ships have adapted our weapons based on your tactics. We can modify our energy beams to create kinetic impacts. Not as effective as your railguns, but it should help." "Good," Walker said. "Have your fastest ships harass their flanks. Keep them from regrouping. My fleet will drive straight up the middle." "That would expose your vessels to concentrated fire," Xalis objected. Walker's mouth curved in a grim smile. "That's what our armor is for, Commander." After the transmission ended, Commander Jackson from the Defender contacted the Valiant. "Admiral, the Defender's forward armor is at 30%. We'll take heavy damage if we push straight in." "Understood, Maria," Walker said. "But we need to keep their attention on us while the Alliance ships hit their flanks." "Can your ship take it?" Jackson didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir. We'll hold together." Walker turned to his bridge crew. "All hands, prepare for maximum acceleration. Weapons crews, load armor-piercing rounds. Medical teams on standby." The remaining Earth ships formed a tight wedge formation with the Valiant at the point. Their engines burned hot and bright as they accelerated toward the regrouping Krull vessels. Behind them, the more nimble Alliance ships spread out in a wide arc, preparing to strike from multiple angles. "They're targeting us," Miller warned as the distance closed. "All Krull weapons converging on our formation." Walker gripped the railing of his command station. "Steady," Hold course. The first hits came seconds later. Energy beams and plasma bolts slammed into the Earthship's armor. Metal glowed, and in some places, vaporized under the assault. But the ships continued forward, unrelenting. Armor failing on decks 9 through 12, a damage control officer reported. Emergency teams responding. Walker felt the ship shudder beneath his feet. Distance to target. 30 seconds to optimal firing range, Miller answered, her fingers dancing over her console to reroute power to critical systems. The Valiant's hull groaned as another hit struck home. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. A nearby console exploded in a shower of sparks, throwing a young officer to the floor. A medic rushed to help him. 20 seconds, Miller counted down. Walker opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, prepare to fire on my mark. Target their engine sections. The Earth vessels continued to absorb punishment as they closed the distance. On the tactical display, Walker could see the Alliance ships beginning their attack runs on the crawl flanks. Commander Xalis had kept his word. 10 seconds. The Defender took a direct hit to its bridge section. For a heart-stopping moment, Walker thought they'd lost another ship, but then Jackson's voice came through, strained but determined. Defender is still operational. Bridge relocated to auxiliary control. 5 seconds. The crawl ships began to adjust their formation, finally realizing the danger of the head-on assault. But it was too late. Mark. Walker shouted. The Earth fleet fired in perfect unison. Railguns launched their deadly projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. At this range, there was no time for the crawl to evade. The tungsten rods tore through their hulls, shredding engine compartments and weapon systems. Simultaneously, the Alliance ships struck from both sides, their modified energy weapons causing actual physical impacts rather than the easily deflected beams they had used before. The crawl fleet, caught in this devastating crossfire, began to break apart. Some ships exploded outright, while others drifted powerless, their engines destroyed by the Earth fleet's precise targeting. Direct hits on 80% of targets, Miller reported, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. Alliance forces reporting similar success on their targets. Walker allowed himself to breathe again. Damage control. Status. Multiple hull breaches, sir. Life support failing on Deck 6. Railguns 1 and 4 still operational. The rest are offline. The battle wasn't over, but the momentum had clearly shifted. The remaining crawl ships, perhaps a third of their original number, were in full retreat, fleeing toward the jump point at the edge of the system. Should we pursue, Admiral? Miller asked. Walker studied the tactical display, considering their options. His ships were damaged, his crews exhausted. They had achieved their primary objective, defending the Vega system, but at a heavy cost. No, he decided. Let them go. They'll carry the message back to their leaders. What message is that, sir? Walker looked at the view screen, where the retreating crawl ships were visible as tiny points of light. That humanity isn't to be underestimated. That our relics have teeth. A new transmission came through. A direct message from Supreme Commander Gorv of the Crawl Forces. The alien's face filled the screen, his gray skin and 4 yellow eyes conveying an emotion Walker couldn't quite identify. Earth Commander, Gorv said through the translator, you have defeated us today with weapons our intelligence called obsolete. How is this possible? Walker considered his answer carefully. Your intelligence was incomplete, Commander Gorv. You prepared to fight energy with energy, shields with shields. You forgot the oldest lesson of warfare. And what lesson is that? Gorv demanded. That innovation comes from necessity. Earth hasn't known peace for most of its history. We've been fighting ourselves for thousands of years. War is in our blood. Gorv was silent for a moment. We will meet again, Earth Commander. Count on it, Walker replied. And next time, we won't be using just the old weapons. The transmission ended, and Walker turned back to his crew. Despite their exhaustion, their faces showed pride and determination. They had proven themselves against overwhelming odds. All ships, Walker ordered, stand down to recovery operations. Assist Alliance vessels as needed. And someone find Commander Zalus. I believe we have some tactical discussions to continue. As the Earth fleet began the long process of damage assessment and repair, Walker knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never laugh at Earth's Relic warships again. 3 days after the battle, Admiral James Walker stood in the Alliance Council chambers aboard the massive space station orbiting Vega Prime. The circular room was filled with representatives from 24 species, many of whom hadn't even known humans existed a week ago. Now, they all watched him with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and in some cases, unease. Walker's dress uniform was crisp and perfect, hiding the bandages beneath. Like many of his crew, he had refused to stay in medical bay once his wounds were stable. There was too much work to be done. The Alliance High Chancellor, a tall, willowy being named Troll whose species communicated through color patterns rippling across their skin, stood at the center of the chamber. The patterns currently displayed showed formal respect, very different from the dismissive flickers Walker had seen during his first council meeting. Admiral Walker, the Chancellor's translator conveyed, the Alliance Council has convened to formally recognize Earth's contribution to the defense of the Vega system. Without your fleet's intervention, this vital system would have fallen to the Krull Dominion. Walker nodded slightly, acknowledging the statement without speaking. Earth's diplomatic course had coached him on Alliance customs, when to speak and when to listen. Commander Xalis has requested to address the Council regarding the battle. The Chancellor continued, gesturing to where the Trescent commander stood. Xalis stepped forward, his movements stiff from his injuries. One of his 4 arms remained in a complex support device. He looked directly at Walker, and then turned to address the full council. 3 days ago, I considered Earth vessels primitive relics. Xalis began, his translator not hiding the humility in his voice. I placed them at the rear of our formation, believing they would contribute nothing of value to our defense. He paused. I was wrong. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Alliance commanders rarely admitted error so openly. Earth's fleet not only engaged the Krull effectively, but their tactics and technology proved decisive in the battle. When our advanced energy weapons failed against adaptive shielding, Earth's primitive kinetic weapons cut through the enemy like they were made of mist. Xalis turned back to Walker. You fought like barbarians, he said, but there was no insult in his tone now, only respect. Perhaps there is something to be said for the old ways. Walker stepped forward. Now is the time to speak. The Earth Defense Fleet did what we were designed to do, he said simply. We protected our allies. We defended our shared territory, and we sent a message to those who would threaten us. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various counselors. Humanity may be new to the stars, but we are not new to warfare. For thousands of years, we fought each other, developing and refining the art of battle. When we found peace on our world, we didn't forget those lessons. We preserved them, hoping we would never need them again. The chamber was silent now, every being focused on Walker's words. We didn't build our ships to impress anyone. We built them to survive, to fight, to win. Walker's voice grew stronger. And while we hope for peace with all species, including the Krull, we will always be prepared for war. The Chancellor's skin rippled with thoughtful colors. The Council has reviewed the battle data. Your casualties were substantial. The ship Intrepid was lost with all hands. Several other vessels severely damaged. Walker stood straighter, the pain of losing Reed and his crew still fresh. Captain Reed made the ultimate sacrifice to save others. Every member of Earth's fleet understood the risks when they enlisted. We honor their memory by continuing their mission. Lieutenant Miller stood at the back of the chamber, along with Commander Jackson and other survivors from the Earth fleet. Their faces showed their grief, but also their pride. The Alliance has much to learn from Earth, the Chancellor admitted, colors flowing in complex patterns. Our military doctrine has been complacent. We haven't faced a significant threat in generations. Commander Zoril, the Volith tactical officer who had once mocked Earth's weapons, stepped forward. I request permission to establish a joint training program with Earth forces. Our crews need to understand these alternative combat approaches. Walker nodded. Earth would welcome such cooperation. The Chancellor's translator conveyed their final statement. The defensive treaty with Earth will be upgraded immediately. Your world is no longer a provisional member, but a full alliance partner, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. As the formal meeting concluded, Walker found himself surrounded by alien military officers, all asking questions about Earth's weapons, tactics, and training programs. The mockery was gone, replaced by genuine interest and respect. Commander Xalis approached him last. I must ask, Admiral, did you know? When you positioned your ships at the rear, were you already planning your attack strategy? Walker allowed himself a small smile. We always plan for multiple scenarios, Commander. It's another old habit. Xalis made a gesture that Walker had learned was a sign of deep respect among Tressans. If the Krall return in greater numbers, as I fear they will, the Alliance will need Earth's old habits more than ever. Later, alone in his temporary quarters on the station, Walker read through the casualty reports one more time. The names and faces of those lost weighed heavily on him. He opened a secure channel to Earth Command, where General Laura Hayes awaited his report. The mission was successful, Walker began. The Krall were repelled, but at significant cost. Hayes nodded, her expression solemn. Captain Reed's family has been notified. He will receive the highest honors. And the others? The same, every one of them. Hayes paused. The manufacturing facilities are already working at full capacity, James. New ships, incorporating both our designs and selected Alliance technology. Not to replace what worked, but to enhance it. Walker looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. They won't be laughing anymore. That was never the goal, Hayes reminded him gently. Respect will do just fine. And we've earned that, Walker agreed. For now. As he ended the transmission, Walker noticed a flood of new messages on his terminal. Requests from across the Alliance, worlds asking for Earth Defense Forces, technological exchange proposals, military training programs. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity. In the void beyond the station, repair ships swarmed around the damaged Earth vessels. The valiant, scared hull bore testament to the battle it had survived, but it would fly again, stronger than before. Lieutenant Miller knocked on his door. Despite her exhaustion, she stood tall. Sir, the crew is assembled in the station's memorial hall. They're waiting for you to speak about Captain Reed and the others. Walker nodded and rose to his feet, straightening his uniform. There would be time for diplomacy and planning later. Now was the time to honor those who had given everything to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. As he walked through the station corridors, Alliance personnel of various species stepped aside, offering gestures of respect. No one was laughing at Earth's relics anymore. Instead, they watched with newfound appreciation, and perhaps a touch of fear, as the representatives of the galaxy's newest, most battle-ready species passed by. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not despite its warlike past, but because of it. The old ways, it seemed, still had much to teach the galaxy.